Jason Rivers could hardly believe his luck as he lifted the first moving box into the living room of his new house. Sunlight poured through the tall windows, and he imagined how warm the rooms would feel when friends and family filled them with laughter. He had worked hard for years as a police officer, saving every extra penny for a down payment. Now, at last he stood in a home that was all his own. The walls were painted a soft cream, the floors gleamed with fresh polish, and the air smelled faintly of new carpet. Jason smiled at the thought that this place would soon hold memories of celebrations, quiet mornings, and perhaps even the start of a family. He paused by the front door to take in the view of the street. Neat houses lined the quiet road, each with manicured lawns and colorful flower beds. He pictured neighbors strolling by in the early evening, greeting him with friendly waves as he watered his grass. It was exactly the peaceful neighborhood he had dreamed of. As he set down the box, he remembered the week of paperwork, the appointments, and the long days he had spent juggling duties at the station and arranging inspections. None of it had felt easy, but every obstacle seemed worth it when he imagined this moment. Inside, placed photo frames on the mantel, one of him with his parents at his graduation from the police academy, another of him and his partner catching a sunset after a long patrol. He arranged books he had collected over the years on a wooden shelf near the window. Some were novels he loved, others were guides on home repair and gardening, a sign that he planned to make this place bloom. He set down a black and white mug. On the coffee table, the one that bore the emblem of his police department. It felt right to keep a reminder of his job close by. Over the next few days, Jason worked steadily to make the house feel lived in. He built a small bench by the back door where guests could sit and take off muddy boots. He hung a welcome sign above it. He laid out coasters on the end tables and fluffed throw pillows to add a touch of color. Each time he finished a task, he felt a small thrill. He thought of how proud he would feel when he showed the finished home to his friends. He could picture the surprise in their eyes and hear their cheers. One afternoon, after he had unpacked nearly all of his belongings, Jason sat at his desk and composed invitations for his housewarming party. He kept the words simple. Please join me for a housewarming on Saturday at 4 p.m. Come celebrate my new home and share a drink. He emailed the invitations to his fellow officers and texted old friends from college. He smiled at the thought that many of his coworkers would drop in after their shifts, some still in uniform. He knew they would bring jokes, stories, and maybe a few snacks. It warmed his heart to think that his work family would help him celebrate. As Friday approached, Jason stepped outside to hang string lights along the porch railing. He tested each bulb to make sure it glowed softly. The lights gave off a warm, golden hue that would shine in the evening air. He pictured the lights reflecting off the polished wood of the floor and casting friendly patterns on the walls. Made sure the extension cord was hidden beneath a rug so no one would trip. The lights were his way of saying, "Welcome. Please stay a while." That same morning, the neighborhood compliance officer, Marjorie Turner, drove by in her white SUV. Known to many as HOA Karen, she took it upon herself to patrol every driveway for rule-breaking signs. As she passed by Jason's house, she frowned at the string lights dangling above the porch. She flipped on her turn signal and parked her car. Jason noticed her through the window and waved. She did not wave back. Instead, she clutched a clipboard. Against her chest, Jason set down his ladder and walked toward her, wiping his hands on a rag. "Good morning, Mrs. Turner," he called out politely. "Just putting up some lights for my housewarming. I'll make sure they're gone by Sunday." Evening. Mrs. Turner adjusted her glasses and peered at the lights. "Your invitation said decorations must be approved by the board in advance," she said firmly. "These lights over the driveway aren't on the approved list." Jason gave an apologetic smile. "I'm sorry, I didn't realize. I'll take them down before Sunday." She nodded curtly and turned on her heel. "See that you do," she said before getting into her SUV and driving away. Jason watched her go and felt his cheeks flush. He had hoped to make a good impression. But now he worried he had stepped on a landmine. He climbed back onto the ladder to start removing the lights. As he worked, he thought about how to smooth things over with Mrs. Turner. He did not want his first impression in the neighborhood to be one of rule-breaking. He decided that after the party, he would bake her a batch of cookies as a peace offering. He imagined handing her a small gift basket with a polite note. "Thank you for helping keep our neighborhood nice." Later that day, Jason filled coolers with ice and bottles of soft drinks. He arranged platters of finger foods on the kitchen island, sandwiches cut in neat triangles, bowls of chips, and a vegetable tray with dip. He set aside a cooler for beer. His friends would appreciate that. He placed small plates and napkins on the counter and made sure there were enough glasses for everyone. He double-checked that the barbecue grill was clean and had plenty of propane. By the time evening arrived, Jason stood in the quiet house and surveyed his work. Empty chairs surrounded the dining table. The music system stood ready. The lights looked soft and inviting. He clicked off the overhead lights and stepped onto the porch. The string lights glowed gently, just as he had hoped. He felt a swell of pride. Tomorrow was the big day. He returned inside and sat on the couch, opening a refrigerator door to pour himself a cold soda. He thought about what the party would be like. His fellow officers in uniform or plain clothes would arrive with their easy smiles and friendly banter. His old college friends would bring memories of late-night study sessions and road trips. Neighbors might peek in to see the new officer who had moved in. Jason thought he saw the future unfolding in his mind, one cheerful glass clink at a time. Before bed, he left the lights up. He told himself it was worth the small risk to see how beautiful they looked against the dark sky. As he drifted to sleep, he dreamed of laughter echoing through the rooms and the clinking of bottles and plates. He imagined Mrs. Turner standing on the edge of the lawn, watching the fun and smiling at last. It felt like the start of something new, not just in his home, but in his life. He fell asleep with a smile, excited for the day ahead. Jason woke early on Saturday, the first beams of sunlight slipping through his curtains. He stretched and sat up, heart fluttering with excitement and a touch of nerves. Today was his housewarming party. He had dreamed of this moment for weeks. Friends gathering to celebrate his new home, but now that it was here, he felt the weight of making everything just right. He slid out of bed and padded to the kitchen in his slippers. The house was quiet, except for the soft hum of the refrigerator. He checked the clock. 8 a.m., plenty of time before guests arrived at 4. He pulled open the fridge door and saw the remaining cold sodas and water bottles. He grabbed one, twisted off the cap, and took a long sip. The chill ran down his throat, waking him fully. He set the bottle on the counter and took a moment to look around. The living room was spotless. The couch cushions lined up perfectly, the coffee table clear of clutter. The string lights still twinkled faintly in the morning light. He thought about Mrs. Turner, the HOA compliance officer, and the brief encounter they'd had the day before. He felt a twinge of worry. Would she return today? Would she try to spoil the party? Determined not to let that happen, Jason took a deep breath and started his morning routine of final checks. First, he went outside to the front yard. The grass was dewy and cool beneath his shoes. He bent to brush away a fallen leaf, then straightened and surveyed the scene. The string lights looked warm and inviting, but he worried they still broke. The rules. He walked up onto the porch, examining how they hung over the railing. He paused, imagining Mrs. Turner's sharp eyes spotting them. He made a choice, better safe than sorry. He climbed the small steps, unhooked the lights, and coiled them neatly on the porch floor. He would wait until after the party's start time to rehang them discreetly. He placed the lights on the bench by the back door. He planned to bring them back out just before guests arrived. With that task done, he checked the kitchen. Next, the platters of sandwiches and snacks sat on the island, covered with plastic wrap. He removed the covers, replacing them with fresh ones to ensure everything stayed crisp until late afternoon. He refilled the ice coolers with fresh cubes, tested the taps on the soda dispenser, and made sure there were extra bottles in the fridge. Downstairs, he adjusted the temperature on the air conditioner, wanting the house to feel comfortable even as people filled it. While he worked, his mind wandered to the friends who would come. He remembered Officer Lee, who always told the best stories about highway chases. He thought of fellow Officer Martinez, gentle and calm, who brought homemade empanadas to every gathering. He smiled, picturing them in his living room chairs, swapping tales of tough days on patrol. Then his college roommate Nate came to mind late night. Movies, endless laughter, but now Nate lived across the country and only came back rarely. Jason was especially glad Nate could be here today. By mid-morning, the sun climbed higher and the day warmed. Jason decided to take a quick break. Headed to the garage where he kept his bicycle. He pumped fresh air into the tires and put on a lightweight helmet. He rode down the block to the corner cafe, hoping to grab coffee and a pastry before things got busy. On the ride, he passed neat houses and waving neighbors. Some nodded as he pedaled by. One jogger gave a thumbs up. The breeze felt good on his face. At the cafe, he ordered a strong black coffee and a blueberry muffin. The barista recognized his department badge on his shirt and thanked him for his service. Jason smiled, sipping the coffee as he sat on a stool by the window. He watched people move by, families on errands. An elderly couple walking a small dog, children riding scooters. Everything looked peaceful. He felt a familiar pride in serving a community like this. He paid and rode back home, cradling the coffee cup in one hand and keeping the bike steady with the other. Inside his house, he parked the bike and placed the coffee on the kitchen counter. He took a long drink, feeling the warmth spread through. He treated himself to a small bite of the muffin sweet, soft, perfect. Then he refocused on the tasks ahead. It was noon now. He had 4 hours until the party. Checked his phone and saw the RSVP count. 15 officers, 10 college friends, and a few neighbors curious to meet him. The number thrilled him. He plugged in his earbuds and played a playlist of upbeat songs. He moved through the house, dusting light fixtures, wiping windows and straightening curtains. He adjusted the positions of cushions on the porch bench so they looked inviting. He rehearsed his greeting in his head. "Welcome to my home," he would say with a smile. At around 1:30 p.m., a knock sounded at the front door. He paused his music and went to answer. On his porch stood an older man in a polo shirt and cocky Sam Richards, one of the few neighbors who had already introduced himself. Sam held a plate covered in foil. "Hey, Jason," Sam said with a grin. "I thought I'd bring over some of my famous Hawaiian rolls. Hope you don't mind." "Not at all, Sam," Jason replied, relieved to see a friendly face. "That's very kind of you." He stepped aside to let Sam place the plate on the porch bench. They chatted for a few minutes. Sam asked about the lights he'd taken down and said the HOA rules could be strict, but that Mrs. Turner usually let friendly people off with a warning. Jason explained his plan to rehang them later. Sam nodded and said, "Just don't give her a reason to come back." They laughed, and Sam told Jason that several neighbors might stop by around 6. Jason thanked him and closed the door. Inside, Jason felt more at ease. He appreciated Sam's kindness. He thought about bringing over cookies to Mrs. Turner after the party and olive branch. He jotted a note to himself to buy pre-made cookies on his next grocery run. He turned his attention back to the clock. 2 p.m., 2 hours to go. Suddenly, his phone buzzed. It was Officer Lee. "I'll be a little late. Got held up on a call? See you around 5? Jason texted back, "No problem. See you then." He set the phone on silent and continued working. Checked the bathrooms, making sure there were clean towels and enough soap. He placed extra rolls of toilet paper on the shelf. He set out air freshener sprays discreetly in each room. By 3 p.m., he felt like everything was ready. The house smelled faintly of lavender from his new candle that sat on a side table. The snacks were fresh, the coolers full, and the music playlist queued up. He stood in the living room, took a deep breath, and smiled. Then he remembered the lights. He retrieved them from the back bench, carried them up the steps, and hooked them along the porch railing again. He tested each bulb, making sure they glowed softly. The lights were back, and the porch looked festive once more. He stepped back inside and shut off the overhead porch light so only the string lights showed the effect was warm. Jason glanced at his phone. 3:45 p.m., in 15 minutes, the first guests would arrive. He smoothed his shirt, checked his hair in the hallway mirror, and practiced a friendly smile. He walked to the front door and opened it a crack, listening. Outside, the street was calm. He thought he heard a car turn into the cul-de-sac, but it might have been his imagination. His pulse quickened. He reminded himself to stay calm. He had worked hard to create this day, and he intended to enjoy it. At exactly 4 p.m., he heard footsteps and voices. He opened the front door wide. 2 uniformed officers, Officer Martinez and Officer Lee, stood there with wide grins and a 6-pack of craft beer. They called out, "Happy housewarming, Jason." Jason laughed and welcomed them in, offering a wave toward the living room where tables of snacks waited. As Martinez and Lee slipped inside, Jason felt a surge of happiness. The day had begun perfectly. He greeted them, handed them glasses, and introduced them to guests who arrived next, stoled friends, neighbors, and more officers. The chatter filled the rooms like warm sunlight. Jason raised his glass and said quietly to himself, "Here's to new beginnings." And in that moment, he knew the early tensions of the morning would fade into the background as laughter, stories, and the glow of his string lights took center stage. Jason stood near the front door as more guests arrived. The music played softly in the background, and the sound of laughter drifted through the open entryway. He greeted each person with a warm smile and a friendly pat on the back. Uniformed officers mingled with friends from college and neighbors who had come to meet him. Some guests wore casual clothes, others still wore their duty belts and badges. Jason felt proud as he watched everyone feel at home. Inside the living room, Officer Martinez and Officer Lee had claimed spots on the couch. They chatted about a recent training exercise while nibbling on sandwiches. Nearby, Jason's old roommate Nate laughed with a neighbor, telling a story about the time they got lost on a college road trip. The kitchen island was covered with bowls of chips and plates of cookies. A cooler full of ice-held sodas and bottled water. Another cooler held cold beer. Jason made sure everyone had what they wanted. Out on the porch, string lights twinkled like tiny stars. A few guests moved outside to enjoy the fresh air. Sam Richards leaned against the railing, sipping his drink, and admiring the view of the quiet street. He told a joke about HOA rules that made Jason laugh. Some guests sat on the bench Jason had built, chatting about family and work. The porch felt like an outdoor living room, cozy and bright. As the crowd grew, Jason wandered through the rooms to check that everything stayed neat. He refilled plates, cleared empty glasses, and straightened napkins. He made small talk with neighbors, asking about their gardens and kids. He introduced co-workers to neighbors who hadn't met them yet. He felt happy to see people mixing and making new connections. In the corner of the living room, Jason noticed Mrs. Turner approaching. Her lips were pressed together in a tight line, her clipboard clutched against her chest. She paused at the threshold, looking at the group of officers in uniform.
Jason.
Heart skipped a beat. He wondered if she had come to complain again. He took a step toward her and raised his hand in greeting. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Turner," he said calmly. "I'm glad you could make it. Feel free to look around." Mrs. Turner's eyes flicked to the officers, then back to Jason. She nodded without a smile. "I'm here to remind you that parties must end by 10, she said in a firm voice. "Also, your lights still violate HOA guidelines." Jason breathed in and spoke gently. "I understand. I'll turn off the lights at 9:30 and keep the party inside after that. I'm sorry for the oversight." He gestured to a bench where a plate of cookies sat. "Please help yourself to a cookie." Mrs. Turner hesitated, then took a cookie. She glanced around as though deciding whether to stay. Jason offered her a cup of lemonade, and she accepted. He led her to a seat on the porch bench. The breeze carried warmth and the smell of fresh grass. He thought a friendly approach might ease her strict stance. While Mrs. Turner sat, a pair of officers in uniform walked by and gave her polite nods. They said hello and thanked her for keeping the neighborhood tidy. She nodded back, her expression softening for a moment. Jason felt hopeful that their shared pride in the community could bridge the gap. Back inside, the mood remained lively. Officer Lee had brought a guitar and began strumming a familiar tune. Some guests joined in singing and others tapped their feet in time with the music. Laughter echoed around the walls, and empty plates and cups piled up in the kitchen. Jason watched from the doorway, feeling the warmth of friendship fill every corner of his home. Suddenly a voice called out from the street. Jason stepped onto the porch and saw a small group of young children riding bicycles past his house. They waved and he waved back. The kids slowed, looked at the party, and rang their bicycle bells before riding on. Felt like the whole street was part of the celebration. Returned inside, where Officer Martinez was telling a dramatic story about chasing a stolen car. The listeners leaned forward, eyes wide. Jason joined them, smiling at the way his coworkers brought energy and fun. Wherever they went, he loved being part of this team. Across the living room, Nate and a neighbor compared notes on local hiking trails. They planned an outing for the next weekend. Jason moved over to join their conversation, asking for trail names and suggestions. The easy way people connected amazed him. His home had become a gathering place for new and old friends. Out on the porch, Mrs. Turner finished her lemonade and set the empty cup beside her. She looked at Jason and spoke in a quieter tone. "I know rules matter," she said, "but I see how much you care about this neighborhood. I may have been too harsh." Jason felt relief and gratitude. "Thank you," he replied. "I appreciate your help keeping things safe and lovely here." She nodded and stood up. "Enjoy your party, Jason. I'll let the rules slide this time." She offered him a small smile and returned to the group inside. Jason watched as she blended into the crowd, chatting with neighbors as though she belonged. He thought that maybe this was the start of a better friendship. Just then, the distant wail of sirens broke through the music. Guests turned toward the windows, puzzled. Jason's heart sank. He dashed to the front door and looked down the street. 2 marked patrol cars and a fire engine had parked near the curb. Officers climbed out, scanning the house. Inside, guests murmured and pressed to see what was happening. Jason felt embarrassment and confusion. He hurried outside, calling to the guests to stay calm. "Don't worry," he said loudly. "It's probably a false alarm." But his voice trembled. One of the arriving officers spoke into a radio. "Dispatch, do we have a call on 17 Maplewood?" A reply crackled back. "Yes. Caller reports suspicious gathering of police in plain view." Jason's mind raced. Someone had called 911. Thought of Mrs. Turner and then realized how it must have looked. Dozens of officers gathered in one house. There was no sign on the door saying Police Appreciation Party, and with her watchful eyes, she might have called it in. He felt a surge of worry. Would this ruin the party? Inside, guests stepped back from windows and gathered near the kitchen. Jason grabbed his phone and called dispatch to explain. While he talked, the arriving officers approached the front porch. Their faces were neutral, but Jason noticed some guests tensing. He hoped his coworkers would identify themselves before things went further. As he ended the call, he turned to greet the newcomers. One of the officers was his Sergeant Morgan, who had arrived out of uniform. Next to Morgan stood to back up officers. Jason stepped forward and greeted them with a salute. "Sergeant Morgan," he said, voice steady, "this is my housewarming party. I invited everyone." Sergeant Morgan frowned, then looked toward the other officers. "We got a 911 call about a house full of police officers," she said. "Caller, thought something was wrong?" Jason nodded. "That was probably the HOA compliance officer," he said quietly. "She saw so many officers, thought it was suspicious." Morgan sighed and spoke into her radio. "Cancel response. False alarm. Party in progress." The backup officers relaxed and called off their units. The fire engine siren fell silent, and the patrol cars drove away. Neighbors peered from windows, curiosity melting into relief. Jason felt a wave of gratitude toward his sergeant for clearing it up quickly. Back inside, the guests cheered as news spread that everything was okay. Laughter returned, louder and more joyful than before. Someone offered to refill Jason's drink, and he raised his glass. "To Sergeant Morgan," he called, and everyone toasted. The music resumed, and the voices rose in friendly banter. Jason looked at his home, now buzzing with warmth and life. The moment of panic had passed, replaced by unity and fun. His neighbors and friends had stood by him, and even Mrs. Turner had blended into the celebration. He felt proud and deeply thankful. The lights twinkled above, the music throbbed, and the smell of barbecue drifted through the rooms. In that moment, Jason realized that his house was more than just walls and furniture. It was a place where people came together, where tensions eased, and where laughter conquered worry. The interruption had shown him that his community cared in, that in return, he would always be there for them. And as guests danced, chatted, and filled the night with conversation, Jason knew that this housewarming would be a story told for years to come. Jason watched as the last of the patrol cars turned away, their lights dimming in the distance. A soft cheer rose from the front porch, and he felt a wave of relief wash over him. He stepped back inside where the guests had gathered in small clusters around the living room. The air felt lighter now, the earlier tension fading like a memory. He smiled as people laughed and pointed out the funny moment when the fire engine's siren had sliced through the music. Officer Martinez set down his guitar and raised his soda. Well, he said with a grin, that was the most dramatic housewarming I've ever been to. Laughter followed, and Jason felt gratitude for his team's quick action. He walked over to Sergeant Morgan, who stood near the kitchen island, and nodded in thanks. She gave him a small salute and mouthed, "Nice party." Across the room, Mrs. Turner rejoined the group leaning against the couch. She held a plate of cookies and sipped lemonade. Jason approached her slowly, his heart pounding a little with uncertainty. Would she be cross after her call to 911? Or would she feel embarrassed? He took a breath. "Mrs. Turner," he began, gently, "I hope you'll forgive the confusion. I'm glad everyone is safe and having fun." She set down her cup and met his eyes. For a moment, Jason thought she might scold him. Instead, she offered a small, genuine smile. "It was a mistake," she said quietly. "I saw so many officers in uniform and panicked. I thought something serious was happening." Jason nodded. "I understand," he said. "Thank you for caring about the neighborhood's safety." She nodded again, more relaxed now. "I see how well your friends and neighbors support you." She glanced around at the crowd. "That's a good thing." Jason felt the tension between them ease. He remembered the cookies he had meant to bake for her after the party. Quickly, he held up a small box he'd tucked under the entry table. "I have something for you," he said with a grin. "Peace offering." Mrs. Turner's eyebrows rose in surprise as Jason handed her the box. She untied the ribbon and opened it to find homemade chocolate chip cookies, each one golden brown, and still warm. The sweet smell drifted up. As he picked one up, examined it, and then took a bite. Her eyes softened. "These are delicious," she said. "Thank you, Jason." He smiled, happy he had remembered. Behind them, the party resumed its easy flow. Officer Lee collected empty plates and brought them to the kitchen sink. Guests moved from room to room, chatting and enjoying the evening. The string lights on the porch glowed softly, casting patterns on the walls through the windows. The barbecue on the back deck still sent up the smell of grilled burgers and vegetables. It felt like a small festival in Jason's home. Jason turned back to Mrs. Turner. "I hope you'll join us," he said. "Feel free to stay as long as you like." She glanced at her watch, then back at the crowd. "I think I will," she said. "But I promise I won't make another call." "Tonight?" Jason laughed softly. "Deal." She stepped away, moving toward a group of neighbors. Jason watched her introduce herself to people she had pointedly ignored the day before. Now, she was laughing at a joke someone told, her posture relaxed. Jason felt proud that his house had become a place where even his strictest neighbor felt welcome. He walked over to the barbecue grill, where Officer Martinez was flipping burgers. Martinez handed him a plate. "In honor of surviving the sirens," he said. Jason took a bite, savoring the simple flavors of charred meat and fresh bun. It was one of life's small pleasures. He looked around, seeing smiles everywhere. Children who had come early to say hello now skipped around the yard, playing tag. A small group had gathered around a speaker on the porch and started dancing, slowly, to a soft love song. He felt a warmth in his chest. Inside, Nate had grabbed a cushion and seated himself on the couch beside Mrs. Turner. He leaned in and whispered something that made her laugh. Jason smiled at the ease with which people mixed now. At the start of the day, he had worried about making a good first impression. Now, he saw that genuine kindness and hospitality could bridge any divide. He left the grill and walked toward the front of the house. The street beyond was quiet. A few neighbors stood on their lawns, perhaps reluctant to miss the fun. One waved at him, and he waved back. It felt like the whole block had turned out to celebrate. He stepped back inside, where Officer Lee was now strumming a calm melody on the guitar. A hush fell as guests listened, nodding in time with the tune. When the song ended, Jason tapped on a glass to get people's attention. Conversation died down, and all eyes turned to him. He cleared his throat and spoke in a warm voice. "Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight," he said. "I feel blessed to have such great friends, neighbors, and co-workers. This house is more than just a building. It's a place where we all belong." He paused, and a gentle applause rose around him. Jason looked toward Mrs. Turner, who smiled and raised her cookie in a toast. He nodded back in gratitude. Then he looked at Sergeant Morgan, who winked at him. He felt connected to each person in the room, and a deep sense of belonging settled in his heart. As the evening deepened, the party shifted into a relaxed rhythm. Some guests moved to the porch to gaze at the stars. Others stayed inside, talking, quietly in corners. The music changed from lively dance tunes to a soft jazz playlist. Jason found a moment to stand alone by the window, watching the glow of the string lights from inside. He thought of how the day had unfolded from the morning worry about Mrs. Turner to the unexpected sirens and the final moments of peace and friendship. He felt a smile spread across his face. His home had passed its first test. It had hosted laughter, handled unexpected drama, and brought people closer together. He thought of all the memories that would be told from this night, the jokes about the fire engine, Mrs. Turner's surprised laugh, the way his co-workers rallied to clear up the confusion. It would be a night to remember, late into the evening. As the music wound down and guests began to say their goodbyes, Jason moved from group to group, thanking people for coming. He handed Mrs. Turner her empty cookie box, now full of only a few crumbs, and she hugged him lightly on the shoulder, a gesture he never expected from her. When the last car drove away and his front door closed softly behind the final guest, Jason stood in the quiet living room. The chairs were scattered, empty plates lay on side tables, and the soft glow of a single string of lights bathed the room in gentle warmth. He sighed, a content, tired sound, and sank onto the couch. He thought back over the day, the nervous morning, the careful preparations, the sudden alarm of sirens, and the joyful resolution. Each moment had led him here, to a home warmed by friendship and acceptance. He closed his eyes for a moment, breathing in the faint scent of cookies and grass and music still lingering in the air. In the silence, he made a promise to himself to keep his home a place of welcome, to always respond to tension with kindness, and to remember that even a strict HOA officer could find a place in his circle of friends. Yes. He drifted off to sleep. On the couch, dreaming of future gatherings, confident that this house would always be a place where everyone belonged. As dawn's light filtered through the curtains, Jason Rivers woke on the couch, the soft glow of the string lights still lingering in his mind. His head throbbed slightly from late-night chatter and laughter, but it felt good, like the ache of muscles after a day spent doing what he loved. He sat up carefully, aware of the scattered cushions beneath him and the faint scent of lavender that still hung in the air. He stretched and glanced around the quiet living room. Empty plates and used cups rested on side tables. A few napkins lay crumpled by the couch. The music system was off, but the playlist still cue-marked its last song in memory. He smiled at the scene, evidence of a night well spent. His shoulders relaxed as he remembered the way friends had joined him here. Neighbors had come out to greet him, and even Mrs. Turner, the strict HOA officer, had laughed and danced. He felt a swell of pride not just in his home, but in the community he now belonged to. He rose and walked slowly through the rooms. The kitchen still held coolers of leftover drinks. The barbecue on the back deck had a few patties left cold. On its grates, he could tidy up later. For now, he wanted to savor the calm morning peace. He stepped onto the porch and tucked the string lights higher on the railing, ensuring they'd be ready for the next evening's dusk. He admired how they looked against the pale sky, each tiny bulb like a promise for more warm gatherings to come. As he re-entered the house, Jason decided to brew coffee. He filled his favorite black mug with hot water, watching the steam curl like little clouds. He added a strong blend from the station cafe, rich, earthy, and smooth. While the coffee dripped, he opened a window to let in fresh air. A gentle breeze rustled the curtains and carried in birdsong from the lawn. Out. He poured the coffee and inhaled deeply, enjoying the simple ritual. He settled back onto the couch, sipping slowly, and thought back over the day before. He pictured himself in the morning, worried about the lights and Mrs. Turner's disapproval. He remembered the careful way he had prepared snacks, organized coolers, and tested the music system. He remembered greeting neighbors and coworkers, making sure everyone felt at home. And he smiled at how the unexpected sirens had turned into a story of unity when Sergeant Morgan and his team cleared up the confusion. He took another sip of coffee and considered what came next. He wanted to maintain the goodwill he had earned. First on his mind was writing a note to the HOA board, thanking them for their guidance and asking if he could attend the next meeting. He would propose a small community potluck in his backyard, HOA-approved decorations, of course, to bring neighbors together in a relaxed setting. He imagined tables filled with homemade dishes, children playing tag on the lawn, and soft music drifting in the evening air. It would be a way to keep building bridges. After finishing his coffee, Jason rose and headed to his desk. He opened his laptop and began typing an email. Dear HOA board members, thank you for your oversight and dedication to our community. I appreciated Mrs. Turner's reminder of our guidelines at my housewarming. I would like to propose a community potluck next month on Friday, August 15th at 6 p.m. This will be an opportunity for neighbors to connect, share food, and celebrate our neighborhood spirit. I will ensure all decorations and activities comply with HOA rules. Please let me know if this date works for you, and I look forward to collaborating to make our community stronger. He reread the message, nodded in satisfaction, and hit send. Feeling productive, he then drafted a quick text to Mrs. Turner. Good morning, Mrs. Turner. Thank you again for joining last night's housewarming. Your presence meant a lot. I sent an email to the HOA board about a community potluck in mid-August. I hope you can join that too. Have a great day. He tapped send and smiled, imagining her reading the message with a small smile. Next, Jason thought about his own well-being. After weeks of moving boxes and party planning, he felt ready for a day off. He changed into comfortable clothes, a blue t-shirt and soft sweatpants, and laced up his sneakers, decided to take a walk around the neighborhood, carry a small trash bag, and collect any stray cups or napkins that might have blown into neighboring yards. It was his way of showing respect for others' property and keeping the area tidy. He stepped outside, the sun warming his face as he walked down the sidewalk. He picked up a stray napkin near the curb and tossed it into his bag. He saw Sam Richards across the street tending his flower beds. Jason waved and Sam waved back with a grin. Hey, Jason, Sam called. Looks like you had a big night. Jason laughed. You could say that. Leftovers everywhere this morning. Good problem to have, Sam replied. The street's talking about your party. They loved it. Jason felt a warm glow. Thanks, Sam. I'm glad to hear that. Jason continued down the block, greeting other neighbors. Some were already out watering lawns or checking mail. He collected small bits of litter and dropped them in his bag. As he walked, he thought about how the neighborhood had felt like a community, not just a cluster of houses. People had looked out for him, stepped in to help, and joined in a shared experience. He made a silent promise to pay it forward. By the time he returned home, his bag was full. He emptied it into the trash can behind his house and washed his hands. He paused to look at his house one more time. The windows reflected the bright morning sky. The freshly watered flower beds looked cheerful. The porch lights were ready for the next evening. He felt content. Inside, he prepared a quick breakfast, scrambled eggs and toast stands sat at the kitchen island. C8. He checked his phone. A reply from Mrs. Turner popped up. Thank you for the message, Jason. I look forward to the potluck invitation. Have a good day. He smiled and typed back. Great. See you soon. He felt that a friendship had started where once there was formality and caution. The rest of the day stretched pleasantly ahead. He decided to do laundry, catch up on paperwork for the station, maybe read a chapter of a novel he had set aside during the party rush. He took each task with calm satisfaction, knowing his home was now a place not just for himself, but for friends and neighbors. Later that afternoon, as sunlight slanted through the windows, Jason paused in his chores. He thought about the lessons. He had learned that kindness disarms suspicion, that clear communication prevents misunderstandings, and that hospitality can bring together very different people. He thought of Sergeant Morgan's quick support, Mrs. Turner's willingness to join in, and the neighbors who had welcomed him. Most of all, he felt thankful that he had a house worth celebrating. That evening, just before sunset, he turned on the string lights again. He sat on the porch with a cup of tea, watching the sky shift from blue to gold. He felt a quiet happiness settle over him. His home wasn't just a building. It was a gathering place, a refuge, and a symbol of his dedication to his department, to his community, and to the life he was building here. As the lights blinked softly, Jason raised his cup. "Here's to many more nights like this," he whispered. And in that gentle glow, with the neighborhood settling in for the evening, he knew his housewarming was only the beginning of the friendships and memories yet to come.